In previous videos, we showed you how to use the applique shapes that we cut with our Leaves Galore templates to make beautiful flowers and dragonflies. Now, I'm going to show you how to use these applique shapes not as leaves or petals, but as geometric shapes. When we are laying out our applique shapes in straight lines and columns, they give you the appearance of a curve-pieced quilt. So I'm going to use a tool called the Quilter's chalk line. And the Quilter's chalk line was designed to mark straight lines very accurately on your fabric. When I am marking a background fabric, I take a pattern cutting board. And this is a cardboard that you can buy at your local fabric store. It's usually much bigger than this. I've made a size that's just more manageable on my table. But you can get a board that's as big as your background fabric. And that board is marked with grid lines that are printed right on the cardboard. By using T-pins, I can mark out the size grid that I need because of those markings on the board. I've placed a T-pin every 3 inches along the edge of my board in 2 directions. Now I'm going to use the Quilter's chalk line. It's very much like a carpenter's chalk line. You just stretch that line straight across, hold it taut, and snap it to draw the line on your fabric. Now you can see that there's a lot of dust that happens when you're snapping these lines. But this Quilter's chalk line is filled with iron erasable chalk. So all of these chalk lines and all of the dust is just going to disappear when we fuse our applique shapes in place. Now I'm going to continue to mark the lines in the opposite direction to complete a 3-inch grid. Now this chalk line is very similar to a carpenter's chalk line. The difference is I've had it made very small, so it fits right in my hand. It also has a rubber door right here on the side where I can add more chalk when I need to refill the chalk line. This bottle is the iron erasable chalk powder, and it comes with the chalk line in a set. And you can purchase this set on my website. Once we have our grid lines accurately marked on our fabric, we can use the leaves and the shapes that we've made before with our Leaves Galore template, and we can start to build quilts that are based on that grid pattern. If we lay these 3-inch leaves over those grid lines, you can see how accurately those leaves were cut. They are exactly 3 inches from point to point. Let's cover over some of our grid lines, and you'll see how you start to form circles with these leaf shapes. So in fact, they're not leaves at all. They're just oval shapes that make a wonderful small quilt that looks like an orange peel quilt, but a traditional orange peel quilt is made with curve piecing. And we don't have to do any curve piecing at all. We're simply going to cut our applique shapes, fuse them in place over the grid, and when I fuse them in place, you will see that the chalk lines and all the dust will just disappear. Now I can tack these leaves in place and just audition those fabrics. If I choose to remove this blue leaf, I can remove that leaf without damage to the background fabric and replace it with a different leaf. So once I fill up the entire grid with my leaves, then I would bring this to my pressing surface and give it a good hot press. I even take the fabric and turn it over and press it from the back with a steam iron when all of my applique is complete. I'm back to show you how we use our Leaves Galore templates as tools for marking quilting designs. You can mark quilting designs for machine or hand quilting using your Leaves Galore templates. I love how they work in combination with the Quilter's chalk line to make beautiful designs for quilting your applique quilts. Now this quilt is just a whole cloth quilt. The center portion of the quilt is an orange peel pattern filled with stippling, and along the edge of the quilt is a feathered quilting design. You'll notice the edge of the quilt is also cut into a serpentine edge. All of these jobs were done with the Leaves Galore template. I have a piece of fabric that was marked with a 3-inch grid using the quilter's chalk line. Now we have another tool that I love to use to mark quilting designs. It's a chalk wheel that is filled with iron erasable chalk. This iron-off chalk powder comes with the quilter's chalk line, but you can use it in any of your quilting tools or any of your chalk marking tools and just refill that chalk marking tool with iron erasable chalk. Now, using the template in combination with your straight marked lines. There are markings on the template that give you straight lines across and down in this direction. This line that bisects the 3-inch curve will be placed right over the grid lines that you've marked. Do you see how these dashed cross lines also line up with the grid? Now we're going to use the chalk marking tool along the edge of the template to mark in one direction. We can slide our template over, again lining up those straight lines on your template with the straight lines of the grid, and mark again along the edge of your template. Now we'll turn the template in this direction. Square up the straight lines on your template with the grid lines and mark once again. By marking in this way, what you have is a beautiful clamshell pattern. Now I have a quilt sample that uses the clamshell pattern. Now because you have the lines marked with your chalk, you can follow those lines using the walking foot on your sewing machine. I've used a beautiful variegated thread in order to make this clamshell pattern. Now back to that sample. If I go back and mark a second line right over the one that we've just marked. So we've marked here already. We're going to slide our template down, and the dash line on the template lines up with the chalk line that you've just made. These lines also continue to line up with the grid. You can mark again to get your orange peel quilting pattern. So it's just a matter of adding additional lines to go from a clamshell pattern to an orange peel pattern. Once you've marked your entire quilt, you can go in with your walking foot, layer all 3 layers of your quilt together, your top, your marked top, your batting, and your backing, and do your decorative machine stitching with your walking foot. Because we have marked our quilt top with the iron erasable chalk, if we're not happy with what we've marked, we can simply iron it away and start again. This design is the orange peel pattern that we had on the original sample. So we've quilted the orange peel, and then I simply went back and stippled the areas inside of that orange peel design. Now I'd like to show you how I made this feather border using the same Leaves Galore templates. So let's just turn our fabric over here. Now I need to mark some straight lines to center my feathered quilting design. So I'm going to use my T-pins and my chalk line once again, and I'm going to place those T-pins about 3 inches away from the edge of my quilt. Now I'm going to mark a straight line in each direction, and that straight line is going to help me center that quilting design. So if I had a larger quilt, this this would represent the corner of that large quilt. So we're just going to mark one corner with our feather design. To make the feather go around the corner, we're going to place either side of the template, and I'll use the 3-inch edge of my template. And we're going to place the template so that a full leaf shape ends right on that corner line that we've marked. So here's the line that bisects the 3-inch template, the 3-inch side of the template, and here's a straight line to help us turn that corner. Now we're going to use our chalk tool to mark the center spine of the feather design. Now let's turn the corner. Again, we're going to use a full outside curve ending into that corner with your straight line here on the chalk line and your straight line that bisects the 3-inch curve on this chalk line. Now take your time to make sure you have a nice square corner, and then go ahead and mark it with your chalk wheel. So this would be the center spine for my feather design. Now, in order to make my feather consistent, I like to give myself some guidelines. About 1 inch away, and I've just marked this by eye, I'm going to mark a guideline on each side of the center spine. And I would do that in both directions. So when I go to do my machine quilting, I would follow the center spine with a walking foot all the way around the quilt. And after the center spine is drawn, you can come back with half heart shapes, and you can follow between the two lines so that those heart shapes stay a consistent width and size, and then go back down the opposite side. So it's very easy to do a feathered border design on any of your quilts. This feather design was marked with the 3-inch side of my medium-sized Leaves Galore template. Here's the finished quilt. So you can see how I made that feather, as well as the center, using the 3-inch Leaves Galore template. I also cut the edges of my quilt using the Leaves Galore template to make a beautiful serpentine edge quilt. The quilt behind me has a larger serpentine edge, so everything that I've just shown you with the 3-inch side of my Leaves Galore template, I can repeat with all 6 curves on the set of 3 Leaves Galore templates. So everything that I've made, including feathers, quilting designs, and applique shapes, can be made in 6 different sizes. All of these techniques and many more are highlighted in my book, Rotary Cut Applique with Leaves Galore Templates. In this book, there are 5 beautiful patterns so that you can practice all of the techniques that you've just learned.